Can everyone hear Michael? Michael just joined. And I just put you on webcam, and I'm going to remove myself from webcam so that you have center stage. Can everyone see Michael? Okay, great. So we'll just get started. Welcome everyone to another edition of Capital and Growth. We interview thought leaders in the startup community, and today we're privileged to have Michael Seibel, the CEO of Combinator. He's one of the most sought people in the global startup community. Some interesting facts about Michael. He co-founded Justin TV, which became Twitch, which was acquired for a cool $1 billion by Amazon after 5 near-death experiences, and he's going to share some more from that story. He was also the co-founder of Social Cam, which sold for $60 million. Needless to say, he knows a thing or two about building successful companies. Another interesting fact is Michael was actually kicked out of Yale University for poor grades, believe it or not, but then re-enrolled and got all A's. He was a poli-sci major, and his first job out of college was on a U.S. Senate political campaign. Michael, I've shared this with the audience, but just for you, we have 2 core audiences today, the Capital and Growth audience and the MEST Ghana audience. MEST is of course, tech startup based in Accra, run by Ashwin Ravichandran, who's also on this call today and who will give a vote of thanks at the end. As I mentioned to the audience, Michael is interested in Africa. He visited Nigeria last year. Is very bullish on African startups, and in fact, he's one of the investors in Paystack, a Nigerian fintech startup. So welcome, Michael. Say hi to the community.
How's it going? It's great to see everyone.
And so, Michael, go ahead.
I said, let's get started.
Okay, yeah. So the first 20 minutes, I'll ask the prepared questions. The next 20 minutes, we'll ask questions submitted by the audience in advance on the Q&A site, and then in the last 20 minutes, we'll ask questions that were asked live in response to what you say. And so we usually start by playing a little game called the rapid response good or evil round. So I'll basically make a statement that has to do with startups, and then you respond with either good or evil and a short explanation of why. So no ifs, buts, or any other qualifier, just good or evil, short explanation of why. The first is software patents. Again, here the context is some say they stifle innovation, others say they still serve the original purpose, which was to encourage people to invent for the greater good. But they've been abused over the years. For example, Amazon had a patent on one-click upsells for 17 years, and they sued the hell out of everyone else for doing one-click upsells, yet the concept is really obvious and not worthy of a patent. So what do you think, Michael? Software patents, good or evil, short explanation of why.
So I would say evil, but for a different reason. You know, these questions, I don't really care to be a commenter about the tech world.
Okay.
I kind of care about it from the perspective of startups. And so from the perspective of startups, typically focusing on software patents is a waste of time.
I see. Next question, the term unicorn. Obviously, it's a good thing. For those not in the know, a unicorn is a startup valued at $1 billion or more. So it's obviously a good thing when a startup gets $1 billion exit, as with you for Twitch. But the obsession to try and build the next unicorn has destroyed otherwise good but smaller companies. They end up chasing directions that lead to failure when they could have been a medium-sized company and successful. So the term unicorn, good or evil, and why?
Good. Let's be clear. Like, there is for startups who are trying to build companies, they're all trying to access capital. And the people who are investing money are not interested in investing in small and medium-sized companies. And to be honest, it's not logical for them to invest in small and medium-sized companies because they can't get the returns they need to make the investments worth it, to make the risk of the investments worth it. So Unfortunately, you don't have the opportunity to raise money from these people unless you're trying to build big businesses. If you want to build small and medium-sized businesses, you shouldn't raise money from these people. And so, yeah, I think it's perfectly reasonable for people trying to build big companies that have massive impact. And that's what the tech funding world is trying to do. It's not to say that people trying to build small and medium-sized businesses are bad or those are horrible goals. Like, that's completely not true. It's just that, like, the economics to provide those people with a lot of startup capital doesn't exist. So if you want access to this capital, it's kind of like saying, hey, like, I want to be, the highest paid player or the highest paid person who works for the Chicago Bulls. Well, if that's the case, you better be a player. You better learn how to play basketball because that's the person that they're going to pay the most money to. And if you want to be in the front office or have another task, you're not going to be the highest paid player.
Got it. Thank you. Then the next one is MBAs, that is Masters in Business Administration at early stage startup. And here the context is famous tech investor Guy Kawasaki famously said that the valuation of an early stage company is arrived at by adding $1 million for every engineer and subtracting $1 million for every MBA. He hates MBAs in spite of being one himself. So what's your take? MBAs at early stage startups, good or evil?
I think they tend to be evil, and this isn't really a statement about MBAs. It's just kind of more of a statement about what I've seen so far. It doesn't, what I'll say is this, like, I don't see an MBA as a qualification or a credential that I care about when picking a startup. So I think it's too extreme to say that it's a negative, but it's certainly not in any way a positive. It's not a credential that I'm going to sit there and value significantly.
Okay, and then the next one is initial coin offerings, aka ICOs. They're being used to raise millions of dollars right now for startups. I believe the simplest explanation of an ICO, it's a hybrid between an IPO and crowdfunding. You get a token that gives you a right to purchase the company's product in the future. You don't actually get an ownership stake, but they're not that well understood, and in fact, they've been banned in China. So in your mind, are ICOs good or evil?
I think ICOs have a lot of potential to be good, and some ICOs actually do give you a quasi-ownership stake. I think it's extremely early, and so I'm sure there's going to be regulation and best practices and rules, but I think in general, they're going to end up being good. Yeah.
Okay. And then the final one is women in tech conferences. There's been heated debate about women in tech recently, but there was an article on Hacker News where some successful women were saying they do not want to be associated with these women in tech conferences because they celebrate their femaleness rather than their professional merit. And in fact, former GE CEO Jack Welch publicly advised ambitious women not to join or associate with these groups for that reason. And he said his best female employees don't want any association with them. So what's your opinion? Women in tech conferences, good or evil?
I think they're good. I think that everyone's going to find their own way to success, and if these conferences help some segment of women create a network, succeed, be inspired, I think that's good. I don't think that like everyone succeeds on the exact same path or with the same strategy, and so I know a lot of women who've appreciated these types of groups, and as long as it's kind of what we say at YC, as long as the users are happy, you're building a good product. So, yeah, good.
Thank you, Michael. So now on to the main questions, and we'll ask fewer because we're running late. So the first is, you've been the CEO of Y Combinator Core for about a year now. What are some key things you've learned? In other words, could you please give us a short State of the Union update in your tenure over the last year?
Those are two very different questions. Which would you prefer?
What does everyone prefer? Send a message.
State of the Union or what have I learned?
Wow, it seems almost evenly split here. Which do you want to talk about, Michael?
So I'd rather do what I learned because State of the Union is kind of more of a PR statement.
Okay, got it. Let's do what you learned.
So one of the things that really attracted me to YC was the potential to help build an organization that could be alive in the Valley for 100+ years. And there are very few organizations who help startups or invest in startups that have had that amount of longevity. And it's an interesting challenge because we're in the second decade of YC, and I think the first decade of YC, so much foundation was laid. The kind of basic structure of the program, the basic advice that we give, how we invest in companies, a lot of the core philosophy of YC. I think in the second decade, the open questions are, how do we make YC self-sustaining? And what is the organization that can lead YC? And what's the organizational structure that can make YC survive for decades and make it resilient to people coming and going, to leadership coming and going? And that's kind of what I'm really excited about. And one of the things that I learned was how to think about YC as an organization. It took a little while, and I realized that in some part YC is a university, and we teach groups of students. In some ways it's an investor, you invest money. In some ways it's a software company. There's actually a lot of software that helps run YC, and there are a lot of software resources we give to startups. And in some ways it's still a family business. There's a lot of flexibility, and we're founder first. If we never want to put ourselves in a position above or ahead of a founder. So having to learn, those are the kind of core tenets that it takes, and having to figure out how to build a base that YC can survive on for the next 100 years, that's kind of been what I've learned since starting here.
Oh, super interesting. I like that you have such a long-term vision, 100 years plus. And so I won't get to ask most of the prepared questions because there are a lot of questions from the audience, but one of the common themes that's being asked a lot is around how you evaluate companies applying to YC. So what would you say are 3 common turnoffs that you see when evaluating companies, either in the application or when you have people in for in-person interviews? 3 common turnoffs.
So it's interesting because turnoffs is the right way of saying it. When you are reading applications, in many ways you're looking for negatives as opposed to positives. And the absence of negatives is a strong positive. So the 3 biggest negatives, poor communication. So after I read the question, what does your company do? I don't know what your company does. Usually it's caused by a lot of jargon, marketing speak, buzzwords. The second is lack of a technical co-founder, or put another way, the founding team itself can't bring its MVP to market. It has to rely on outside people, outside contractors, something else. The last thing is, well, I'll do 2 more. The second to last thing is a lack of speed. So we often use the term traction, and I think a lot of people think it means a lot of customers, and there are tons of YC companies that get in without any customers. What we really think it means is, let's look at how long you've been working on this business and how much you've accomplished. And are we impressed with that? So, if you're building a website and you've been operating the company for 2 years and you're still in beta, that's not very impressive. It doesn't take a very long time to build a website. If you're building a rocket and you have, CAD drawings of an initial part of the rocket engine, you're working for 6 months, that's actually could be fairly impressive. So, are we impressed with the speed at which you're operating the company? And then the last one on the application side is commitment. one of the things we always say is that, how can we commit 100% if you're not committed 100%? We like to see founders who've already jumped off the ledge and are all in on the startup, not founders who are looking for YC to validate their idea. We're not smart enough to tell you whether you have a good idea. And in the interview, the number one thing in the interview is clarity of communication. The first question we ask in every interview is, so what does your company do? And if in the first 30 seconds you can't clearly explain what your company can do in a way that we can understand, the interview tends to go off the rails. That's the number one hack for what a company does. We always, as an entrepreneur, I always hated when people said, oh, you should be able to explain your company in a way that your mom or dad understand. But now, having done this, it's totally true. If you're using words that your mother and father don't understand to explain what your company does, you probably don't need to do that.
I see. So you mentioned not having a technical co-founder is a big negative, but we all know that unless you're doing a hard tech startups, user acquisition, how you acquire customers is far more important than tech. So do you think it's not possible to succeed by using
I'll know that. I don't know that.
A vendor company to do your dev work? Do you absolutely need a technical co-founder?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I mean, are you kidding me? 1,000%.
Okay.
I 100% completely disagree with using a outside development shop to try to build $1 billion company. I 100% disagree. You will not get into YC if that's how you're trying to build your company. I think that we invest in technology companies. We're willing to lose on you not being the best business plan maker or pitcher or something like that. We're not willing to lose on you not being able to build good technology. And we think technology is applied to every problem. Customer acquisition, cutting costs, hiring, product, onboarding, customer service. Technology is applied to every problem. The biggest companies out there are technology companies, and they apply technology to every problem. And we're trying to fund people trying to build the biggest companies out there. So, yeah, no, if you are not looking to make tech a core, that doesn't mean you don't have the potential to build a good company, but it certainly means that you shouldn't be looking at YC.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you for being so authoritative on that answer. So now we move on to questions that were asked in advance on our site. So Precious Okafor from MEST wants to know, from your experience working with and funding over 400 startups, what would you say is the major cause of failure?
So I'm going to give you a caveat with this answer, is that you have to understand that this would be the cause of failure for a YC company. So this is a company that's already been able to successfully get into YC and receive our funding. I would say the number one cause of failure is mistaking that your company is hit product market fit. Basically, mistaking the point where you figured out the right solution, the right product. And I think that what companies tend to do is they tend to scale up their team and their expenses before they understand whether or not they have the right product. And that is often deadly. I would say, in general, the answer is very different. So if I were to look at startups in general, the number one thing that screws up startups is founder dispute. That's for sure the number one thing. Founding team breakup is deadly.
I see, got it. And then the next question, David Blankenship wants to know, what can you do to retrigger a can-do mindset? And he says, perhaps like your venture Twitch, my current one has had some near-death experiences and my previous one failed. During cash crunches, I sometimes get so overwhelmed with fear that I can't get out of bed. What did you do during those moments to get back in track? To get back on track?
I think that what did we do to get back on track? You know, it's
like,
interesting because
during those near-death experiences, like how did you recover?
Yeah, like I guess what I would say is that like near-death experiences actually inspired us. Like I would say there's kind of two types of bad experiences. One is your company's about to die, and two is morale is low. And I would argue that like strangely those would be different moments for us in my experience. Morale was kind of high. High is not the right word, but like our motivation was very high when we were about to die. That's kind of what brought out the best in us. Whereas I would say that like the doldrums were not when we were about to die. They were like, you know, when we were just doing okay. So yeah, that's kind of a hard question to answer.
Okay, and then Will Poole, who's actually an investor, wants to know, how do you do due diligence for overseas companies? You don't know the market, you don't know that environment, yet you're accepting them into YC. How do you do due diligence?
Man, that's a hard question. So there are a couple of things I think that we do. So one, we're investing in companies early. So a lot of our focus is on the founders and their ability to build things and talk to customers. And less of our focus is on trying to predict whether this is a billion-dollar market. I think that investors who invest later have to be a lot more careful about that. I think second, you know, we invest in a batch format, so not all of the companies have to succeed. You know, it's built into our model that a lot of the companies are not going to succeed. And that's kind of the state of startups. I think the third thing is that we have a huge alumni network. So there are now 3,500 alumni that have done YC. So we often will tap alumni both when screening applications, but also when looking to get some local opinion. And the last thing is that we travel a lot more than we used to. For the last 3 years, we've been doing major tours around the world and learning more about markets.
Thank you. Question from A Hage. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right, but he wants to know, he's from MEST, if you were to build a company today, what problems would you look to solve?
So I actually had an idea for a company, and thankfully it walked right into YC, and we funded it. It's a company called Zenesis, and their core goal is to try to build software to help developing countries develop. And the problem that I wanted to address was, how do you actually run a country when you have you know, a lack of massive, well-educated bureaucracy? And it seemed to me like, you know, in the U.S., there are literally like millions of people who keep the country up and running at the like local, state, and national level. And if you were trying to run and they're all, you know, well-educated and motivated and so on and so forth, right? And even in that case, the country doesn't run perfectly. And so, you know, if you're trying to run a developing country where you don't have access to as much human talent, or that human talent doesn't want to work for the government, what is the software that you could use to help run a country better? I was a poli-sci major in college, so it's I was always been interested in government. So that was the problem that I actually wanted to try to solve with software. And this company came into YC and pitched us on doing that, and it was great. We funded it. So that was my last good idea.
Okay, so just to clarify, what country are they trying to run with?
It's not, well, it's not, I wouldn't say they're trying to run a country. What I would say is they're building software tools that help other people, that help governments do a better job. So basically, put another way, you know, if you're a government, they try to look for what is your biggest problem, and then instead of trying to solve that problem with policy or with hiring, they try to see, can that problem be solved with software? If the government had a better software tool, would that help them do that better?
I see. That's super interesting. There's a book called the Geek Hearsay by a development researcher who spent some time in India, and he basically, the conclusion of that book is, if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So technologists tend to think that if something is failing, you can magically swoop in with technology and solve problems, and it very rarely works. And so when you said that, it got me thinking about that book. So what?
Well, I mean, I think that's a very, I would just completely disagree with that thesis. I think when people think about technology, they dismiss a lot of what technology is. So I read this book on the history of the JP Morgan family, and it talked about the hot tech companies of the early 1900s, and one of them was AT&T, and they were running telephone wire around America. And being able to pick up the phone and call someone is technology. And I don't think anyone could say that being able to call someone has made the government worse. The computer that replaces huge stacks of paper are technology. I don't think that computers have made the government worse. So I think technology is what makes the whole world better. The reason why there's more food now than there used to be is because of technology. There really is no part of human civilization that hasn't been improved by someone building some technology. So the idea that technology doesn't work in government is crazy. Without technology, there wouldn't even be buildings for the government workers to build in, so to work in. There wouldn't be the means for them to communicate. There wouldn't be the means for them to collect taxes, to distribute services. So it's kind of a joke. If he's trying to make a more nuanced thesis, which is tech people and consultants can go in and actually make something worse, I totally agree. Technology can also make things worse. But the idea that they only make things worse is kind of silly in my mind.
Thank you. Yeah, I probably oversimplified his thesis. I'll send you a copy of the book, but for now, let's move on. Justin Wainaina wants to know, in a few words, what kind of team culture would you want to see created in the startups you invest in?
So I always think that the startups that I like are the ones that try to leverage the collective brainpower of the entire company. The startups that I don't like are the ones that try to say there are a set of thinkers and there are a set of doers. And the doers shouldn't be thinking, they should just be taking orders. I think that the goal of a company should be to bring the smartest people in possible who are effective and then use their hands and their brains.
Okay, thank you. And then question from Kevin Gow. What are obvious problems and obvious solutions you think startup founders ignore, overlook, but have potential to grow into? He says million-dollar businesses. Obviously, you're looking to fund billion-dollar businesses. So I'll rephrase the question for him and ask, have the potential to grow to billion-dollar businesses?
That's not my job. My job is not to distribute startup ideas. I don't believe in that. People should work on problems that they're passionate about. They shouldn't work on problems that some investor tells them are potential billion-dollar businesses.
Well, what about the RFCs that you publish, calling for companies that are going to invest in ideas that you guys have come up with? Is that not...
Requests for startups, what it actually does is it signals to startups that are already working on those problems that YC is interested in them, as opposed to inspiring people to start working on those things themselves. Our perfect example of that was our request for startups for biotech. Did not get a bunch of people to start saying, let me start biotech companies because YC is looking for them. We got a bunch of biotech founders to say, oh my God, YC actually wants to invest in biotech. We're going to start applying. So request for startups is not, hey, you don't have an idea, take one of ours.
I see, got it. So you're looking for domain experts already working on those problems, and you'll just support them.
Exactly. We want to make those people know that YC is interested in them.
Got it, makes sense. And then Nduati asks, did the university meet your expectations when you went back? Do you feel like what you learned in university has been useful to your startup career?
No, not at all.
So if you were to do things over, you would skip Yale entirely, just do startups somehow?
No, I think the value that Yale provided was not in the classes or from professors. It was in collecting a large group of motivated people together. I wouldn't be in startups if I hadn't gone to Yale because I wouldn't have met my co-founders. So the biggest value of good universities is they collect a lot of smart people. But I think if you want to be an entrepreneur, the value is not necessarily classes, unless they're teaching you a skill set that's relevant to what you want to do. Certainly if I wanted to be a software developer, being a CS major at Yale would have been helpful. Poli-sci classes have not proven to be helpful at all in what I do.
Got it. And then Opeyemi asks, dynamics, culture, and traction are different for African startups. How do you factor that into the YC selection process? I think it's somewhat related to the due diligence question when evaluating overseas companies.
I would say you gotta ask that question more specifically. Like, I don't know that dynamics, culture, and traction are different for African companies. I mean, like, I don't sit around trying to figure out what's unique about African companies versus American companies versus European companies. That's not the process of choosing companies. You look at a company like Paystack, like, it's trying to solve a pretty basic problem. People want to be able to pay for things online. Developers want an easy way to collect money from their users. They built it. Like, they have customers. Like that. Paystack doesn't look like a quote-unquote, doesn't look special because it's done in Africa. There are things that they have to do a little differently because because it's in Africa, so it's beneficial that they are from the place that they're building for. But it's their responsibility to navigate those dynamics.
Got it. And then an anonymous user asked, what do you wish you had known when first going into tech and entrepreneurship? If you were to look back, a couple of years, what do you wish you had known back then?
What I wish I would have known. I've been really lucky, so it's hard for me to it's hard for me to think through that. What do I wish I had known? I think one of the things is around management. I think that I would have. It's very valuable for there to be a high level of trust between co-founders. And part of that trust is being able to define responsibilities between the co-founders and trust that each person will hit those responsibilities well. I think that one of our challenges in management at Justin TV was while we had a high level of trust, we didn't have that kind of organizational dynamic. And the one thing, if I could have done it over again, I would have said, hey, look, let's take the kind of executive responsibilities, let's distribute them amongst ourselves, and let's trust each other to do a good job at them.
I see. Okay, so now we will go to the live questions. But before we do that, there's one more question. Someone's asking, are there any disadvantages of going through a startup incubator? So I guess the question is, obviously there are immense benefits to joining an accelerator like YC or Techstars or MEST Ghana. Are there any disadvantages? I guess you take a small equity stake, but besides that, are there any disadvantages?
Yeah, I think there are massive ones. Okay, so I want to be clear, startup accelerators are a very weird thing. I think that a lot, YC success has caused a lot of them to be created. but I kind of want to remind people of a couple kind of core truths. One is that the vast majority of great companies never did any accelerator at all. And so the idea of the accelerator is a required step is just simply not true. It's not a required step at all. Second, a lot of people think about accelerators like universities. Is there a significant difference between going to Harvard and going to Princeton and going to Duke and going to, pick another school in the top 10, top 15? Probably not. Amazing quality of students in all of those places. Accelerators are not the same. Like, the difference between the best accelerator and the 10th best accelerator is huge, is massive, both in terms of returns and in terms of quality of alumni, quality of companies, quality of advice. So I would be very, very careful. I don't think, this is not a progression. Accelerators are not required. And the number one way that I would judge an accelerator is not on the kind of people who are running it, but on the people who participate. I have this saying about a co-working center. Like, if you're going to, we typically tell people not work in co-working centers, but if you're going to work in a co-working center, the first thing you should do is walk in and listen. If it's quiet, that means that there are actually people doing work. If it's loud, it means you should get out. For me, accelerators are similar. Look at the companies participating in. Are they successful? Are they smart? Are they the kinds of people that you want to surround yourself with? If they're not, then get out of there. It's not necessarily your only path. So yeah, I'll be the first to say that there are people who for whom YC wasn't very valuable, and there are people for whom accelerator is not the right choice. And there are bad programs out there. There are programs that can be a setback, that promise more than deliver, for sure. There exist many of them.
I see. So some interesting thoughts. I'm working out of WeWork and this pin drop silence, so I must be on the right track. Anyhow, so you said there's a huge difference between Harvard and say some small community college somewhere, if you're using that analogy.
No, I think that the differences between colleges are actually a lot smaller than the differences between accelerators.
Oh, got it. Okay. And so for the very best accelerators, like say YC or Techstars, you said that some people who went through YC didn't get much value out of it. So for those few companies that YC did not work for, like what were the disadvantages? Why was it not valuable for them?
I don't think there was like a disadvantage. I just think that, like, for example, we've had companies where the founders have a fight and the company breaks up during the batch. For them, YC probably wasn't that valuable. I don't know. I feel like it's too easy to use an educational mindset, right? If you want to be a lawyer, go to law school. If you want to be, a doctor, you got to go to med school. If you want to be a startup, you have to do an accelerator. No, that one's not true. If you want to be a startup, you have to build a product that your customers love. You do not have to do an accelerator.
Got it. Okay, so now we'll turn to more of the questions from the live chat, and I'll just pick questions at random because there's so many. I'll try and not ask questions we've already covered. What's the most important, Derek Muiti asks, what's the most important thing for you in a startup? Is it the quality of the idea or the compatibility of the team members? I think you've harped a lot on the latter, but I'll just let you take the question.
It's the, it's funny, right? It's definitely not either. The number one thing, man, it's hard to reduce it down to the number one thing. If I could reduce it down to the number one thing, though, I would say it's the ability of the team to build a product. The ability of a team to build and ship a product is probably the number one thing. There are too many startups who die before they ever ship.
Okay, so you think actually building and shipping the product is harder than acquiring the users and customers?
Yeah. Yeah. The percentage of our startups who build and ship, like, they get customers. Yeah. Whether they get enough customers to be $1 billion business, well, that's all depends, right? But I think building and shipping is the hardest thing for a startup to do.
Okay, and then Mara's asked 3 questions, so I'll pick one of Mara's. Can you have product market fit without monetization?
It depends on what your product is, right? So the definition of product market fit that I always found best is that your product is being used by so many customers that you cannot handle all the new people who are coming in your front door every day. And you are basically almost drowning in demand for usage of your product. And your entire priority becomes, how do I keep on serving these customers, as opposed to how do I serve them better, or how do I serve them more, or what are new things that I can do for them. It's almost impossible to not know you've hit product market fit, and the vast majority of people who say they have not. I think people use product market fit in a very weird way. It basically means I'm building the thing that I think my users want. Product market fit is only tied to, are you drowning in demand?
That's super interesting, but to be fair, very, very few companies ever get to that state. And yet there are successful companies that struggled initially to acquire the first few. I was listening to a podcast by Scott Cook, the founder of Quicken Books. They struggled mightily to get their first 10 customers, and then later, they became successful.
When you come up with the idea, like product market fit is defined by when the moment where the customers are overwhelming you.
I see.
So I don't really kind of understand like the concept that you could have product market fit and not a lot of people wanting your product. Like, until there are a lot of people wanting that product, you did not have product market fit.
Okay, and then related question that was asked by someone, and seems to be asked a lot. In your case with Twitch, you had 5 near-death experiences, finally succeeded. How, as you look for product market fit, how do you tell the difference between foolish stubbornness on an idea that will never work out, and the healthy persistence required to see through something that has potential?
So I think that foolish stubbornness doesn't come from continued work on the same problem. It comes from unwillingness to iterate the solution. I think that actually a lot of founders fall in love with their solution, their product, instead of falling in love with the problem that it's solving. And I've actually seen a lot of founders do this. Like, I've seen a lot of founders build a product, realize it didn't solve the problem that they think it might have solved, and instead of throwing away the product, they throw away the problem. And they start trying to find other problems that this product can solve. And typically the reason why you're so passionate about your startup is because you really care about the problem that it's solving. And the solution is just a means to an end. The end is solving the problem. So if your solution's wrong, throw it away. Do something else. So, what I often tell people is that if you are still excited about iterating your solution, and you're still passionate about the problem, keep working on it. But don't confuse iteration, don't be confused. If you're changing the customer and changing the problem that you're solving, you're changing your company. You're pivoting the company. I think more startups would succeed if they were more bullheaded about keeping the customer and the problem the same and changing the solution.
Got it. Thanks. Startup Santana, I see your question, but ask a broad question. So Startup Santana is dialing in from India. It's very late out there, so I acknowledge you. Thank you. But please ask a broad question, and I'll ask it. The next question is from Russ Sedat. Can you talk about the future of work? Where do you see work itself going?
That's pretty broad. I don't have a lot to say about the future of work. Yeah. Sorry.
Okay. No worries.
I'm not really like a tech visionary. I don't or a commentator on the tech world.
then a question from Paulo Marquez. What do you think other accelerators are doing that's overrated? And what do you think, what do you think accelerators are doing that's overrated? That's his question.
I think that one of the biggest misconceptions about YC is that we're niche. I think that startup founders learn on their own. And startup founders basically have to be driven to, they have to be driven forward such that they hit problems, and then they have to be resilient enough to solve those problems. So a lot of what YC does is drive you forward. And I think one of the mistakes of other programs, startup classes, accelerators, so on and so forth, instead of driving you forward, driving you to launch the product, driving you to interact with your customer, driving you to try to sell the customer, driving you to fail, and then driving you to iterate the product, they try to teach you a bunch of stuff, and they try to kind of over-prepare you for that process. And I'd argue that, like, the only way a muscle gets stronger is by working the muscle, not by, like, theorizing about the best way to work the muscle or studying how the muscle works. You got to work the muscle. The muscle of a startup is its product and its interaction with its customers. And so YC works the muscle. And I think a lot of other programs overemphasize curriculum, underemphasize launch and interacting with people.
I see. Thank you. And then a question from Alvaro Zarate. He says, I'm a founder of a YC for SMEs, small and medium enterprises in Latin America, with over 2,000 companies in 2 years. What do you think about small and medium enterprises transforming into startups? And by that, I'm assuming he means you take, mom and pop shops, laundromats, and little shops, and you try and transform them into scalable startups. What do you think about that?
It sounds like a fine theory to me. I guess I would just apply the same rules, though. Does the team have the ability to build the product? If I'm trying to go from running a restaurant to building DoorDash, well, if my restaurant team has the ability to build software, that's very helpful. If they don't, well, then they're not going to be DoorDash or any of the like. So what I would say is this, is that a lot of our best founders have really experienced, especially B2B founders, have really experienced the problems that they're trying to solve personally through their work experience. And we love people who basically had like a really tough problem in work and want to quit that job so they can go out and solve it. I think that a lot of the times that actually can come out of small and medium businesses for sure. But that insight on the problem, while important, is not more important than the ability to build and iterate product.
Okay, and we have 3 more minutes, so I want us to end on time, be respectful of everyone's time. So Ashwin, are you on? I'm going to invite you to give a vote of thanks. Ashwin is the general manager for the MEST accelerator based in Accra, Ghana. About half of the attendees are from MEST. So Ashwin, I see that you're muted. Just unmute yourself, give a vote of thanks, and share a few words of wisdom. Ashwin, are you there? Okay, Ashwin's not responding. So to end the AMA, I'm going to ask you, Michael, having evaluated more startups than most people in the world, do you have any parting thoughts or advice for our audience?
Other than what I've said, the best piece of advice I've been given about startups is that it really takes 10 years to build a large, impactful company. And so choose to work on a problem that you actually care about. A problem that, like, you don't mind waking up every day for the next 10 years working on. Don't choose based on what you think investors will like or what you think is hot or what you think is the trend. because you can't predict those things. Choose based on what you love. At YC, we have no thesis on what the future of the world is going to look like. We want to support founders working on things that they are passionate about. So as long as you're working on something that you love, you'll have the resilience to stick around for the time it takes to make that thing good. So that's probably my last piece of advice.
Okay, Ashwin, I see you're on. Do you want to say a few words, Ashwin?
Yeah. Hi, Michael. First of all, thanks a lot for doing this. I've been a huge fan and been following YC at least through my startup career. I'm really glad you've been able to do this and talk to the entrepreneurs here. At MEST, we're doing some pretty incredible work in training them from 5 different countries and giving them what we think is the right kind of support in terms of resources and facility and space and so on and so forth. Thanks a lot for doing this. I'll definitely reach out to you if we can probably see any ways of some synergy or the other. And I know your interest in Africa is spiking because I think this is where opportunity is pretty much at the highest right now. So definitely keep in touch.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, everyone. We'll end at this point, and we'll send a follow-up email with a recap and links to the recording in a couple of days. Thank you again. Have a great day. And thank you, Michael. Cheers. Bye.